So I am beyond excited for our panel discussion this morning. And the topics we'll be covering around marketing and advertising in today's changing economy and climate. So first, I want to take a moment to introduce each of our panelists. And trust me, this was extremely difficult. I want to maximize the time that we have to hear from them. So I had to clip their little bios, and I had to take out some really, really cool stuff. So I apologize in advance for having to abbreviate many of your accomplishments. These are incredible people, and if you want to know more about them, it's all online on the website, acceleratedsm.com. So we're going to start here with Gregory Bailey. Gregory Bailey is the CEO and founder of Denim, a company reimagining the way that insurance and financial services companies market, engage, and sell with intelligent, data-driven technology. Gregory speaks on innovation, marketing, and technology topics internationally at insurance and financial services conferences. He also has a very cool podcast called Denim Rivet, which I really enjoy listening to on the train to work. So next here we have Matt Ostanik. Matt is a serial entrepreneur and an author. He helps companies uncover the story their data is telling them to grow revenue with a smarter and faster approach. As the founder and CEO of FunnelWise, he has developed a powerful analytics engine and best-in-class approach to help sales and marketing professionals discover the right actions to maximize results. Okay, next we have Courtney Yuskis. Courtney is an audience development director for Meredith Agrimedia. She works with developers, editorial teams, sales reps, ad operations teams, and clients to deliver a balance between advertising success and a positive user experience. Welcome, Courtney. And then finally, at the end, we have Mike Draper. Mike Draper is the owner of RAYGUN. He created the t-shirts that you all got when you checked in today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, round of applause for those. Very funny, very cool. So he started RAYGUN here in Des Moines East Side in 2005. He was born 6 blocks from the store in 1982. Geographically, he says that he has not come very far in life. RAYGUN is a $4 million clothing company, although Mike is regularly surprised that he still isn't rich. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists this morning. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off with a question that I think is very relevant right now, and any of you are, of course, welcome to take a microphone, and you can do a quick intro if you'd like. So our first question of the day. We wouldn't be talking about digital advertising if we didn't mention Facebook, especially because it's in the news so much lately. Can you speak to Facebook's data security issue and how this has affected and will continue to affect advertisers using the platform?
Fun one, right?
Yeah.
On such a happy note, hello everyone. It's awesome to be here. As Kaylee indicated, I'm Greg Bailey, founder of Denim, and I picked up the microphone because this is essentially what we do. We help insurance and financial services companies and their agents and advisors in each of their local markets to scale on behalf of all of those local agents and advisors, all of their Facebook and social media and mobile advertising. I'll just quickly say a couple of things. Number one, because this audience is a little bit different than an insurance type audience or financial services type audience, that I think for a room like this, if you're building a business or have an idea to build a business, that I think Mark Zuckerberg's news feed announcement back in January is probably of more pertinence and relevance to an audience like this than even the headlines of the last 2 or 3 weeks. Let's keep in mind that I try to, every time there's news, and make no mistake about it, I think Facebook should have done more and could have done more than they've done. And I think Zuck said as much. But for advertisers on Facebook, nothing's changed yet, actually, in the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Yesterday, there were 9 new announcements of API changes from Facebook, 9. And also this week, they've announced for the first time in 3 years that they're updating their terms of service for all of us that are users of Facebook. So starting on Monday, your Facebook experience when you log in and use the app is going to be different. And you'll start to see all of those third-party applications right at the top of your news feed that you've been hearing about in the news. That's coming on Monday. So a lot of activity, a lot of news. They should have done more. They could have done more. It seems like now they're taking drastic and fast actions to change. But at the end of the day, I'm very, very bullish on where Facebook's headed here in terms of advertising, businesses advertising on the platform. There's never been, look, data is extremely powerful to help businesses, help customers and consumers when they need it most. And data provides that lever to be able to target consumers in just the right way to be helpful. But at the same time, data in the wrong hands can be used for harm, and that's unfortunate. And so we like to think that with great power comes great responsibility, and Denim is taking a stand, and we're taking a stand to say, hey, we want to be that safe harbor for our customers to be able to leverage this in the right way, not in the wrong way.
I agree with everything that Greg said. I think it's a great set of commentaries. Thank you. The one general comment I would add to it is just the headlines raise the importance. We probably all know this as business owners and entrepreneurs, but just thinking about privacy issues and the extreme sensitivity around them. And when you dig into some of the details of the Facebook stuff, and I'm not an expert on it, but as I understand it, some of the logical details don't seem that bad. Like they could have done more, but they kind of followed the right rules at the time. But as the media has shown, I mean, it's just people are going to be hypersensitive around these things. And even if you're running a small company or thinking about starting a company, just really paying attention to privacy issues and thinking about how you'll address that in your own application in the future, yeah, there's going to be lots more incidents like this, right? So we all need to be more sensitive. It's a really good reminder of that.
We'll go in order. As working for Meredith, and specifically Meredith Agrimedia, data is incredibly important to our business. Without an audience and that data about the audience, we really don't have a very good revenue model. So I think that it's important to realize that yes, data is important, and audience targeting and all the segmentation you can do is important, but this isn't specific just to Facebook, right? This privacy issue and these breaches are running rampant in the industry. And as small business owners or entrepreneurs, you have to be very respectful of the value exchange. So if someone gives you an email address in exchange for a product or any type of information in exchange for the services you're offering, just make sure that you have everything possible in place and that you are incredibly transparent with your users, because once you lose that audience, you really lose the ability to sell them product, to sell them services. I also would encourage you to just watch what's happening with GDPR. I think it's General Data Protection Regulation. Okay. Just thought I'd throw some more acronyms at you. But the EU has always had more stringent privacy policies, but now the regulatory agencies are actually able to enforce those. And yes, it's happening in the EU, but it also impacts a lot of businesses here in the US, Facebook, for example. So just keep an eye on that to see if that fundamentally changes how we can collect data and how we can use that data.
Oh yeah. I guess I think about it that when my mom ordered something from Land's End in the '80s, 3 months later she was getting an LL Bean catalog, and you wonder how does that happen? And it's because LL Bean buys the catalog list from Land's End. So it's not like selling customer information really came about with like the internet. So there's always been this just kind of knowledge pervasive in society that, oh, if you put your information out there, you don't have access to it necessarily anymore. I do kind of come down on Facebook's side a little bit in terms of the advertising, that I would rather see ads that are like tailored specifically to me and my interests. I don't use a personal Facebook page though, or Twitter or Instagram. I mean, that's the other thing. You don't have to be on it. It is surprisingly easy to delete your Facebook page. And so it's not something you have to be on. If you are on, I think you would prefer to see those ads. Although I guess I do like sometimes when you just watch regular television on like a show like 60 Minutes, and you're able to see, oh man, I guess the people who watch 60 Minutes are way older than me. It's like, I don't need half of these drugs yet. So that's kind of fun to see. You can know what kind of audience is interested in a show, but I would prefer to have ads a little bit tailored to my interests. So I think there's definitely pros to digital advertising, even for the people being advertised to. Oh yeah, I have a newborn also, so less time for social media. She has I've got 4 kids. They've all got social media pages, obviously. Hard to keep the newborn off Snapchat.
Okay, cool. So you guys have combined so much experience, and you've probably tried so many things, and you've had some failures, and you've had some successes. Can you share with the room today one thing that you've done that has consistently worked well for you in terms of marketing or advertising?
Oh yeah, I guess we use social media at RAYGUN a lot for like marketing. The stuff that has consistently gotten a good response will be things that are a little more related to like behind the scenes of what goes on, or like ideas we didn't use. So if there's any like large event like the state fair, you'll have maybe like 60 ideas that you didn't use. I guess 90, 30 of which we will never tell anybody what they were. Some of those things are like borderline really offensive there would be like a hashtag boycott RAYGUN, but 60 of them are like just we didn't make into them, and so we'll tell people, oh, these are ideas we didn't use. And people seem to enjoy any sort of interaction, and that they have a window into something that maybe the general public doesn't. So if the store and the website are used for, this is the final product, you could use social media for, oh, here's the stuff that didn't make it. And then anybody who interacts with you on social media has a little bit of a window into the company that somebody with just customer interaction doesn't. So anytime you can kind of pull the veil back a little bit to show people a little bit of who works there, social media should be a little more like just person-to-person contact when done right. Of if somebody came into the store, your interaction with them casually is a little bit more like what social media should be like. It's talking to a person, not necessarily just the company.
A couple of things. Number one, I would say if you don't have an email list, start your email list, own your email list. That's kind of standard number one. Second thing is, if you're not driving all your traffic to your own website rather than a social media page, I think what we've just seen with Facebook and others is like, hey, you have to own your embassy is what I like to call it. Own your embassy, own your website, drive your traffic there. But the real thing about this, the thing that's consistently worked well for us, and it's our product at the end of the day for our customers, it's one of the core value props of why the market buys what we do and what we've built. It's this notion that hyper-localized advertisements across mobile and social media, where consumers spend our days and our attention, our eyeballs are on these devices now. It's that hyper-localized ads win big time in comparison to just kind of carpet bombing across the entire United States or across, the entire globe. And so what our product does is it hyper-localizes these agent and advisor placed ads. Well, an agent and advisor is a person, it's a human. And so the ad placement at the top of the page has got a profile pic, right? And that profile pic, instead of being some, in our case, insurance company logo, it's a person. It's an advisor, it's an agent, their photo. And so an identical ad placed in a local market where they do business is likely to perform up to about 250% stronger and better than an identical ad to the identical person when shown from an insurance company brand logo page. And so you just have to think about that. The other notion of this is that when you get down to actual metrics of what we look at, so WordStream is a kind of a data aggregation and benchmarking service that's out there in the digital marketing landscape. And if you think about like cost of advertising on some of these platforms, in the vertical that we're working in today, insurance and financial services, you might not know, but interesting to note that cost per click on Facebook, as an example, in that vertical is the highest among any major vertical or industry. And it's about $3, I think the last survey in 2017 was about $3.77 a click is the industry average. And with Denim, we're seeing cost per clicks on these hyper-localized ads in the 50 to 60 cent range. So all of a sudden now you have this ROI that's just significant. And so really what works well, we try to use our own platform and dog food our own stuff as well, and take our own medicine that way. So those are a couple of quick things that I think would be helpful to any type of group like this.
I'm going to take a little bit higher level view of this, and what has worked well for Meredith and Meredith Agrimedia is to focus on our product, which is content. And if We provide really good content that tends to draw in the right folks, and we focus on that experience. So there are lots of different tactics to build your audience or to build your lists, but you have to have the product, and you have to clearly understand and communicate that value proposition for the product. I apologize for those that were sitting at the table over there earlier because you've heard some of this before, but if you don't believe in your product or service or what it is you're offering, then what are you going to market on social channels, or when you're paying for AdWords, what are you actually going to market? So believe in the product, provide a superior product. Don't be afraid to charge for that product, and charge a premium if it commands a premium.
What's that? Oh. Yeah, I agree with that. No, I mean, it really is like product first. Everything is kind of like sales, so you have to have something quality to sell. But yeah.
Yeah, completely agreed as well. I would add one more specific tool that's worked really well for me, and I should mention my career has been in the B2B space, right? So the businesses I've built have been focused on selling products and services to other businesses. So a little bit different than the consumer focus, similarities and differences. But a great tool for me has always been LinkedIn. So the professional social network in some ways. And LinkedIn has evolved a ton over the years and is still evolving. But even through the different evolutions of it, it's been a great platform. I've used it heavily for recruiting over the years. I've hired some great employees that I never would have connected with if I hadn't found them on LinkedIn first. I've used it a lot for connecting with individual prospects, people that I think could buy my product or services. And then interestingly, LinkedIn has evolved into quite the content platform over the past couple years. And probably about a year ago, my business, FunnelWise, started focusing on using it even more for content. And I would say we're still in the early stages of that, but we've really tried to ramp that up and view it not just as a tool for one-on-one conversations, which it is, but also as a way through proper management of your network and connections and sharing thoughtful content and provoking discussions, and now videos and images and all of that. It really can become a great distribution platform to get your ideas out there as well. So definitely a very valuable tool in the B2B space.
Wonderful. I love LinkedIn. It does this really cool audience measurement or overview for you. So with VolunteerLocal, we had tried ads on LinkedIn and they weren't working. And then we looked at that audience and we realized most of the people who follow our product are marketing professionals, which we never would have thought that. So we changed our voice on social media or on LinkedIn to try to cater a little bit better to them, and we saw huge success in terms of the interactions that we were getting. So LinkedIn for sure has a great little audience dashboard. So you've all told us about that one thing that worked well for you and has worked well for you consistently. Can you talk to us about a strategy? Where does a small company start, and what are some strategies that produce results even on a shoestring budget?
I mean, I've always kind of been a believer in just quality interactions with people, that anybody reaching out and asking a question, any question, is essentially a chance to communicate with like a possible customer. And so if you're going to have Facebook, Twitter, an email account, anything, respond to it. It makes no sense to have these things out there and then nothing comes back to a person. And so you may be comparing yourself to like a monster company that has, tons of likes, tons of fans. But I've always, as somebody, when I started the company, it was just me for the first 2 years. And so I, kind of slogged through those periods of you're just working your way up. And the one thing that always kind of kept me going was the idea of like 6 degrees of separation, that every one person you're interacting with is going to be in contact with 6 other people about it. And so as positive as you can make that interaction, it's like you talking to 7 people. And that does add up slowly over time. So, you don't want to lose day-to-day interactions because of huge strategy. Every interaction with somebody can make a difference. So you just want to make that as good as humanly possible.
I'll add to that too, because that can be very overwhelming. When you think about that and think about all of the different tactics that are available to achieve something like that. So I think in my world, what has worked is you identify your single objective. If it's to grow your own list, because I agree that is incredibly important to own your own customer database in some capacity so that you own that relationship with your audience. But then every tactic that you decide to do to grow that audience or to engage with that audience must align with your single objective. Otherwise, you are going all over the board, especially when it comes to social media and the opportunities there, or audience segmentation and targeting and all the opportunities there. So find one thing, know how you're going to measure it, because what you measure moves, and align everything you do with that single objective.
That's a really great point. Let me just piggyback on it, okay? Since there were no pigs this morning, piggyback on it. And weren't there pigs last year?
There were
Dancing pigs?
dancing.
Right. Some people may not have been here last
Yeah.
year, right, and missed that. They need to clarify the context of that. Yeah, right. This notion about list. So strategy was the question, and marketing strategy may in fact be like the biggest strategy that you could ever create, and it's important. A couple of things that, and look, I've led marketing at Fortune 500 companies, big companies, now a small company. And what I'm about to say I've used across 20 years of marketing background and experience at big companies and now at Denim. And it's the notion that, hey, yeah, your marketing strategy is going to be really big, but when it comes to annual planning or quarterly planning or whatever you're working on, pick 3 to 5 things. Don't pick 14 things or 27 things that are within the strategy and try to execute on all of them. Pick 3 to 5 and execute well. And hopefully you see that from our company from time to time. Right now we have a lot of focus on email. Look, email's not going away, right? Email is a thing. And by the way, just a quick little snippet about going back to that data privacy, the first question. Show of hands, how many of us use G Suite or a Gmail service for email? Right? It's probably 90+% of the room. And we should be mindful of the fact that every email we send, there's a company that is the backbone of that service that has capability to access a heck of a lot of data about the communications going through that platform. And so just be mindful of that as a quick aside. I would just say on the strategy question, though, I'll take it at kind of a little bit different level. Know who you're talking to, so know who you're trying to message with. You just commented on this, right? You never thought that marketers would be your audience. You had to change your messaging to direct the message better at that audience. We've spent a lot of time, Tim Lane sitting over here, Director of Marketing for Denim, and Tim's got about 8 or 10 years background and experience in marketing and communications in the financial services industry. And spends a heck of a lot of time thinking about who are our customer segments, and not just stopping at who are the segments, because at the end of the day, if we're working in one vertical or a couple of verticals, insurance and financial services, there are a heck of a lot of consumer or customer segments within just that. And then we break it down even further than that, and we develop personas. And personas are kind of the behavioral or psychographical or just relational elements that help inform how we message. And so when you look at Denim's marketing strategy just on one component of it, we're breaking that down into, say, what should the email say? What should the video content be? What should the blog article content be when focused on a CMO type level at an insurance company versus a day-to-day user of our product or an advisor that's using our product, an agent that's using our product? That's a lot different messaging for those various audiences. So I would encourage everyone to not just think of that as like something I'll get to someday, but make it a core part of your business right up front. And the faster you can get your head around that from a strategic standpoint, I think the better off your connection will be with the marketplace that you're trying to sell into.
Really good points. Completely agree on all of that. So my answer to this question is I actually have a book recommendation for you guys that I wanted to share. So I should say this is not my book. I actually don't know the guys that wrote this book. I have no financial interest in it. But it's probably the best marketing book I've read so far this year. It's called Traction. And if you go on Amazon and look for Traction, there's actually several different books named Traction as well. So I wanted to let you guys see that to make sure you pick the right one. It's the one that talks specifically about growing startups and acquiring customers for startups. But I'll tell you just a little bit about their hypothesis, which fits actually really well with your comments too, Greg. So we're using, and I should say, we're using this in our business right now. So my company, FunnelWise, we've got a very sophisticated analytics product that is mostly used by B2B marketers. And we're launching an additional complementary product that's more focused on sales professionals. And it's a similar audience, yet slightly different than who we've been talking with. So we've been using the methodology from this book this year to really help us develop and refine our marketing strategy for this new product launch. And what the book talks about, what Traction talks about, is what they call a bullseye methodology, with really, if you picture a bullseye with 3 different rings in it, and the outer ring has like every possible marketing channel that you could be using. And they list like 19 or 20 of them in the book in a lot of detail. And then they say there's this second inner ring where you should pick, kind of like Greg said, your 3 to 5 that you think might be the best fit for your business. Part of their pitch is you don't really know what the best ones are going to be until you test them, though. So put that middle ring with your 3 to 5, maybe it's 6 different channels, and then do a series of quick, repetitive tests and gather data about how those channels are performing for you and what's driving the best conversions, interest, customers, whatever your metrics are. And ultimately, you end up with this middle center ring, the actual bullseye, that has your top 1 or 2, maybe 3 channels that are producing the best results. And they get into a lot more detail about that approach, but I really, being a data guy, I really like their approach of testing, of refining, of you don't know the best until you actually test the data, but kind of progressively narrowing in on what channels are best performing and should be part of your longer term strategy. So if you have a chance and you're interested in those topics, great book to check out. And again, no personal connection with it, but it's been very helpful to our business.
Well, I love that you brought that book. I've read it. It really helped me. What I love the most about this book, Traction, they actually have a section of the book that you can open up, and they've created the spreadsheet for you to track each channel, which I had no idea how to even create that spreadsheet. Like, what do you even name the columns? But they actually show you how to do it. So it's a great book. Thank you, Matt. Here's an interesting question. What is one thing, and this is, in your opinion, coming from your backgrounds, what's one thing a startup can do to achieve brand authenticity, knowing that they have no brand equity in the market yet?
Yeah, I've always found building authenticity to be funny, because it's like, well, wait a minute, isn't authenticity just a sign of being authentic? It seems like such an easily defined thing. It either is authentic or it isn't. So I think step 1 is to be authentic. If you are selling something that you don't believe in at all, or you're like, God, this is a bunch of bullshit, but I'm sure somebody will buy it, there is probably no way to actually be authentic. It's like, that is the antithesis of authenticity. You can try to make it look authentic. So, I mean, really believing in something is probably like the way to go. With RAYGUN, it's a little easier to build in like authenticity, because when I first started selling t-shirts, I was just selling t-shirts on college campuses, and I did that for like 6 months. So you're like selling t-shirts on the street, and then I moved back and ran the store for 2 years. So it isn't like a top down. I started with a ton of venture capital, and we were trying to build this brand that sounds authentic. It actually is authentic. It is exactly what it sounds like. And so there is no way to fake authenticity. And it's always funny to me with it's like a huge inauthentic brand that's like, now how do we make it seem more authentic? And it's like, well, step 1 would be authentic. And so it's tough for me to always hear, like, we're trying to build authenticity. But there is, somewhere, no matter how large a company is, there's got to be some story in there that is like the kernel of authenticity. And then you want to build on to that, not just for marketing, but even for the company's sake, of realize, well, what's at like the heart of the company in the beginning? What were we building off of? A lot of times in a company, you're kind of creeping in different directions. And sometimes it takes you even thinking, well, what is the core purpose of the company being? And you even need to think about what that is to get yourself back on track, so you're not like wandering around.
So a couple of thoughts on this, and I'm a non-traditional founder, I would say, that spent 22 years in an industry with, kind of graduating up the corporate ladder and then hit age 40 and take a parachute leap out off a cliff and start a company. And so I think of brand equity, authenticity in this question around credibility. And when you're creating something new, the market has to deem you credible before they'll even engage with you to have a conversation, much less buy something you want to build or have built. And so a couple of just helpful thoughts around how do you become credible with something new that you're creating. Number one is, as you're doing market research or you're trying to identify where the pain point is that whatever you're going to build, your product or service is going to solve, as you're going into the market and you're thinking, hey, I want to meet with these people to see if this is truly a problem, if this is a pain point, invite them to go along the journey with you, and to the extent that they'll allow you to bring them and invoke them into conversation with your other prospects, your other pipeline, your other potential investors, your other potential recruits, whoever it is that you're building community around, that's very, very helpful. So for us, in those early days, before we ever had a product, we were meeting with folks that some of which are in this room at the IEDA or other places, and American National Insurance Company. Well, they're not a huge consumer brand, but they happen to be a $3 billion annual revenue multi-line insurance company with 1,500 agents around the United States. And that logo meant the world to us. They hadn't paid us anything yet, but they were our beta customer even before we had built a product. They were giving us feedback and investing into us with time and expertise. Now today, we go into the market and we use great logos and brands like Guardian Life Insurance Company, a Fortune 200 from New York that we work with, and Voya Financial, a Fortune 500, and others along that path. And so by leveraging those logos, there's no secret why startups and tech companies often on their website put a lot of corporate logos of their customers, their investors. All of those people in the audience and those groups in the audience can lend credibility to what it is that you're bringing into the market. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is to, through that kind of research exercise, though, in identifying the pain points, figure out where you can be most valuable just in terms of thought leadership and sharing your expertise. And so, and then find a channel, a distribution channel, a voice, a mechanism to get your thoughts out of your head onto a website, a blog, if you're a blogger, into an email strategy, if you're an email newsletter type person. For me, I love microphones, and I'm a podcast guy. And so 2.5 years ago, with the help of Brian Himasath and others, we had this little idea to put together the very first insurtech-focused, insurance technology-focused podcast that was ever out there in the world. And to date now, 2.5 years later, we've had something like 35,000 people listen to it in about 75 countries, and it's kind of a thing. And so the last thing I would say on this point is be consistent. Whatever you select, whatever you choose, do it consistently, because your audience will expect it from you after a while. And the easiest and fastest way to lose credibility is to be inconsistent in your execution.
I agree with everything that's been said. I would also add, to all those great suggestions, I would also add, focus a lot on customer experiences too. So to be authentic, you really need to make sure the experiences that your customers are getting with your product or services match up with kind of the promise that your marketing is offering them. And frankly, when you've got 1,000 customers someday on your product, it's going to be hard to make sure they all have a great experience, and some of them may not. That's just the reality of scaling. But when you're small, when you've got 5 customers, 10 or 20, work your butt off to make sure that they have outstanding experiences. And sometimes there's challenges with that. I'm not going to say my businesses have always done that perfectly, but certainly that making sure those early adopters have a great experience and are willing to speak about it to others, to be testimonials, and really validate that you're delivering what you promised, that can be a real key to building that foundation for authenticity in the future.
Again, agree with everything. And I would add that if you are going to solicit feedback, be transparent and be very forthright in why you're soliciting that feedback, but even more importantly, what you're going to do with that feedback. I had a product manager tell me once, she said, why are we asking for feedback when we clearly know none of these things are on the roadmap? So just know what you want to do with that and how you're going to put it to use, and try to communicate that back if you can.
Great. I have, oh, go ahead. Too much agreement. I have one more question, and then I'd like to open it up to all of you for any questions that you might have. So my last question here, I think I kind of nerd out on this stuff, and we kind of alluded to it a little bit with the book Traction. There are a lot of tools out there for measuring social media and marketing success. Can you talk about a compelling tool that you found in the last year? What's the most compelling one?
Denim.
I mean, man, there are so many different ways to like measure it, because from the outside it's going to be tricky, because you could say, oh, we'll even do this with our own like employees to say, well, give me what you think our top 10 selling products are for last week. And then I'll give you the list of the actual top selling products. And almost to a T, their list is what was popular on social media the last week, which is a terrible indicator of what we actually sell. Sometimes something that's really popular might actually sell. Sometimes it might be popular and not sell. Sometimes it's not popular, but it sells. So it's difficult to measure it in one exact way to say, oh, we only put out social media based around stuff that sells well. I mean, the goal is to sell stuff, but sometimes there are, things that you put out that are, just to kind of build like the brand identity, which may not be directly tied to selling a specific product, but will help sales in general. I mean, similar to the way stores will build displays for how they want to sell an item. Sometimes 50% of the other stuff on the table is just to help you sell one thing in the center. You're not selling much of the rest, but it's meant to kind of build this aura around the central product that you can move, that it's going to sell on its own, and the other stuff is like assisting selling it. So it is difficult to specifically find like a way to like measure how your social media is doing. You kind of just have to pick a strategy, stick with it for X number of months, and then assess it at the kind of end of a period and make some changes.
Yeah, I don't think that there is a silver bullet for use this tool to measure everything that you're doing. Unfortunately, there is a very serious lack of standardization across the board in digital. There is a lot of fraud, a severe lack of transparency in how things are measured and what they're measured. And you can make the data say whatever you want it to. And so to your point, I would really just figure out what it is you want to move and what you want to measure, and then find a tool, as opposed to looking at tools that promise a lot of things and then trying to plug your system into that. And it may be that you have to use a couple of different tools to do that. So make sure that you understand where the data is coming from, how they're measuring it, and if it correlates directly to what you're trying to do.
I really like that advice. We need to find something to disagree on as a panel, but yes, I really like that advice. Completely echo. Figure out what you want to measure, then find the tool, and there's no silver bullets for sure. Now, Greg and I are both going to be shameless in pitching our own products, but if you're in the B2B space, that's what my company does, FunnelWise. For B2B marketers, we help you connect your marketing efforts into sales results, right? And I started the company a few years ago because in my last startup, measuring this stuff drove me nuts. I spent way too many hours in Excel spreadsheets trying to manage that. But in the B2B space, there's particular challenges with connecting marketing efforts into pipeline creation and sales results. And so in that space, that's what we focus on. In B2C or other businesses, there's other needs for measuring, and there are thousands of tools. But map out your strategy and then start testing things on that.
I don't have anything to disagree on because you're smart, smarter than I am. So I would just say this, it's important to measure. Like, can't tell you how many people that I meet with and they just don't have a focus, and people I meet with even in our customer base, and they're not, you would think, gosh, these major companies, how could they not measure this stuff? And so let's underscore that. Number one, you have to measure it. And what Matt just described, hence the name of his company, I think I like it. FunnelWise is, whether you call it a funnel, whether you call it a revenue cycle, whether you call it marketing and sales, whatever you call it, measure it, and the stages of that funnel or conversion or whatever you want to call it. And so for us, I'll just give you a couple of quick tactical things. Your email provider, your email service provider has likely got some analytics in it, and that's important. Track it and look at your month-over-month trends. We do. Is there a question coming up, I think, about what doesn't work? I've got an interesting story I'll save for that. Google Analytics, right? If you're driving all of your traffic or the majority of your traffic back to your website or to your blog or wherever you're driving it, measure it and try to improve it and do small tests that do things that help you improve your analytics and your metrics and engagement with your market. And then ultimately, you know, you have to think about it. In today's day and age, we say, hey, nobody picks up the telephone. You cannot call people, cold call people like you might have, you know, back when I started in business in 1995. It was yellow pages and like engagement announcements in the local newspapers, and you would call people. That doesn't exist today. And so we're big on lead nurturing. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that we have a big email database and a big CRM database and of leads, and nurture those leads and have a kind of a structured approach to how you do this, and then measure that. That helps tee up these opportunities then that allow you to get in and sell eventually.
Great, okay. I like the question of what doesn't work, so we should try to squeeze that one in, but I do want to stick to my promise here. Let's open it up to you guys. If you have a question, raise your hand. We've got 2 young ladies at the microphones who are going to hand them to you. Are they both young ladies? Because that'd be funny if they weren't. Yeah, okay, great. All right, so if you have a question, raise your hand and they'll come find you. What doesn't work? Hey.
The question was, what doesn't work?
Yeah, so quick story. Whoa, that's hot. I guess it was like the 1st of December, just a few months ago, I thought, oh, let's, we need to run a holiday contest. Like, one of the metrics that we measure is the health and vitality of our list. One of the metrics within the email list is it growing or is it declining? We obviously want our email list to grow. And this is a lead. Just think of it as a kind of our community. How big is our community of people that are interested in opting in to get our updates, to get our communications? And I thought one of the greatest ways to do this would be to create a wonderful holiday kind of giveaway, like a free giveaway. And people would have to enter the contest or the giveaway. They'd have to give us their name and email address and opt in. And we told them, hey, you're opting in and you'll get further communications from us and all that jazzy stuff. Well, we packaged up a book, a denim t-shirt, which is like, everybody wants a great denim t-shirt. And what was the other thing? Oh, a Yeti, like a really nice denim logoed Yeti for your coffee, right? And so we took this cool photo about it. We started running Facebook advertising to this. And it wasn't a lot of money, but it was Facebook advertising. And it turned out what I had not envisioned was that off of this, that there would be people like Frankie Penance. And Frankie Penance is somebody who ended up winning. We did a random drawing of all of these people who had entered on this list. It turned out in about 3 weeks' time, 800 people had entered our contest to win this little gift. Well, it turned out also that they had nothing, virtually nothing to do with anything that we needed to communicate about. And so the unintended consequence of adding 800 people onto our email list was, A, that metric about growth of the email list, yeah, right, 800 new people. The unintended consequence was that our click-through rates and our engagement on all of our email communications in the weeks following that absolutely went in the trash can. They tanked. And so Tim over here, I was saying, Tim, like, what's going on with our email open rates and like what's going on here in the weeks following in January and such? And he said, Greg, we got to backtrack and pull all those 800 people that wanted into the free thing. We got to get them out of there. And we did. And the very following week, everything went back to normal and it's continued to grow. So you have to be mindful that if you're not going after that target audience that you really want to add into your community, that's something for us. Now, don't expect any free sign up, give us your email and win a free gift. Don't think we're going to be trying that one anytime soon again.
I just want to say, don't undervalue your product. Once you get into the coupon, the discounts, the trials, all of that, it's a really hard cycle to get out of. So believe in your product from the very start and the value of that product or service.
Yeah, I don't know how bad this is going to sound, but it's something we've talked about at the store sometimes, that it's often good. It depends on what you're putting out on social media, but if you're putting out kind of like opinions and you're in the space where you get some people kind of grouchy at you in social media and like any sort of like backlash, you sometimes just have to view social media as like a toddler, in that you may feel like you've put out something that is defensible and you're in the right, but social media is like not the space for nuanced points, and things can kind of like turn on you very quickly, and it, you know, loses sight of what the original point was. Similar to like if your 3-year-old wants yogurt and you give them the pink spoon and they wanted the purple spoon. I mean, they turn into like the Incredible Hulk of like throwing yogurt, totally illogical. There is no point in being like, well, actually the purple spoon is the same shape as the pink spoon. You may as well just like clean it up and back up and try to start over again. So there is no shame in just like deleting a post, and then you would just surrender as soon as possible. Like oftentimes it is not the, like winning the argument may be your goal, but then suddenly the argument gets so big that it's just like the argument that is what your like page is known for. So although in, you know, human interaction, it could be like, well, I'm trying to make a point and here's the facts behind it. Social media sometimes does not work that way. So if you ever find that you're in like a space where things are kind of just spiraling against you, just like delete it, pretend it never happened. Like I'm not gonna bring the yogurt thing up with my like son when he's older. I'm just gonna say it to a room full of people. It's like, I've forgotten about it. Clearly I haven't. It still bothers you to be on social media and to feel like you're getting ganged up on, but there is like no shame in just deleting it and moving forward.
Good stories. There's lots of things that don't work, but it depends on your business, right? You've got to test it and try it and figure it out. These are some really good examples up here. I would say I was thinking through my own stories. You know, probably my personal biggest marketing fail actually involves naming, and I'm not going to tell the full story, but I will say when I was starting my current company, FunnelWise, before it was called FunnelWise, we picked a different name for it, and actually spent a ton of time and creativity brainstorming names, and came up with a brilliant name for it that we were very excited about. And then we found out as we started to use it that, you know, well, 1 out of 10 people we talked to thought the name was slightly inappropriate or had an anatomical connotation that we totally didn't realize. And if you want I'm not going to tell the story on video up here on stage. If you want the full story, I'll tell it to you at Tech Brew tonight when we all have drinks in hand. Feel free to ask me. But long story short is, you know, if 1 out of 10 were telling us that, then probably 5 out of 10 were thinking it. And we realized, I learned painfully, that you shouldn't pick names for things without testing them in the market first. So one of my golden rules now is when you're naming new things, always go out there and get some market feedback from your audience before you really go all in on the naming. Good lesson learned, good marketing fail. I'll remember that one for a long time.
I have a question. Let's see, we got Denim and FunnelWise. And are you guys, you know, are you competitive, complementary? Is that a null set? Or well, hopefully you don't see you fight it out there on stage, but just kind of talk about it. It seems like there's, in the Venn diagram, it seems like you guys share some space. So tell us a little bit about how that is. Stupid question or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll answer first. I would never compete with Greg, because even though he says I'm smart, he's got decades more marketing experience than I have. He knows a ton. But I think our products are actually very complementary and operating in slightly different spaces. You know, what FunnelWise does, we work with marketers and sales in B2B businesses, primarily in the tech space at the moment, although with some of our new product work, we're hoping to broaden beyond that. I would actually say, you know, some of the stuff that Denim does would be a nice complement with what FunnelWise does. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Greg, but I would not describe it as competitive.
Yeah, so we truly are first engagement of the market, right? And so if you think about, you go to Facebook as an example or another mobile app or something like that, and you see an ad placement, and that's the revenue model of all kind of mobile devices, if you want to think of it that way, or social media platforms. We're powering smart ads to be there. And so we're doing a few things that help monitor and track and all those kind of analytics around that. But at the end of the day, I agree that, I think it's the first time today I've agreed with anything though, so that's okay. We're very complementary, and we're not doing anything about monitoring pace of, you know, opportunities through a pipeline or those types of things that you might think of in a kind of a pipeline, a sales pipeline would be a little bit more downstream. And so, yeah, I would say the only thing that we're really intersecting on maybe is our love for Starbucks on University or something like that each time we get together. So that's how I would answer that question, though. Yeah, complementary, and then we're playing in two totally different spaces at the moment in time, and we're building traction within a vertical that I think you've got some interest in, and that could be interesting at some future point in time, but we're just not in the same markets right now.
All right. Hello. Hi. I have a follow-up question related to marketing metrics. First off, I want to toss out a quick plug. Matt is very humble. He actually wrote a book on marketing metrics and funnel science, and he didn't plug himself, so I'm going to plug it for him. He's got a great product and a great company. In my experience in the digital space, there's this big race to the number of touches that you need for conversion. Do you guys have any advice to us about how to get to the number of touches? Is it still 10? Is there any guidance about maybe what the contact is before conversion? And how do you get to 10 or whatever the number is without overwhelming your audience?
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough because it's going to vary so much. I mean, there's certain things on like the internet that are written like, oh, here's a metric to measure yourself by, and here's a metric to measure yourself by. And we will, kind of use everything that these guys have talked about, whether it's Google Analytics or back end of Facebook or back end of email lists, and kind of measure everything. And it will sometimes, the conversion rate will fluctuate from product to product. And it's not always that a sale is going to move the needle. It's not always that a new product is going to move the needle. And so you can get some basic trends, but we try not to get too lost into hitting exact conversion rates or exact people touching something or seeing something. But it's just, yeah, there's no one easy answer to it. It is tricky even because you would think to yourself like, oh, a company like us that's been doing this for now 13 years. I mean, we're not even that old, but when we started, all we had was a MySpace page, because you couldn't be on Facebook without a .edu address. And so then like Twitter didn't exist, Instagram didn't exist, and so we have kind of grown up with social media and I think are pretty good at using it. But even people who are experienced in it don't know exactly how everything is working. I always said the frustrating thing about running a company is that you can only explain 70% of its success. 30% is this kind of mysterious area that you're just trying not to mess up. In that regard, you're like along for the ride with everybody else. And so you think, well, I hope just that area that I don't understand keeps going well. So even when you get experienced at it, you're not going to have every single answer to it. It kind of is a trial and error, and you hopefully will make fewer errors as you go based off of your past, but there's no one clear path to follow day in and day out.
Good answer, Mike, and good question, Ed. I would say also you have to do a fair amount of hypothesis testing around it. So, organize your marketing data. There's these sweet spots for the number of touches on the marketing side, as you're alluding to. There's also a sweet spot on the sales side if you have salespeople, how many times they should follow up with prospects. But on the marketing side, organize your data so you've got enough of it that you can start to make some guesses around what the number of touches are and the types of channels that are being most effective. Almost every marketer, at least in B2B that you talk to, will tell you they don't have good enough data. It's not perfect, though. Organize it as best you can. Analyze it, whether you do it manually or use a tool or whatever, and come up with a guess or a hypothesis to test and say, well, maybe we think it's 6 touches and one of them needs to be through a live event and the others need to be through these channels. Then go out and start testing that. And for the next quarter, run a series of tests against that hypothesis and say, well, do the ones that get these number of touches actually convert more successfully? And you may find that you were right or wrong on it, but it's kind of that progressive series of experiments with it to validate the assumptions. And that's how you can get there even if you don't have perfect data to measure it off of.
You guys were talking about asking for feedback. How do you go to a specific client or a specific set of clients and ask them to analyze how you performed for them? What's the best way to do that as opposed to just looking at social media data, etc.?
I guess I would just answer by saying ask them, understand what you're trying to gather, right? And so you have to know the questions. It's incumbent upon us as founders of companies to know the right questions to ask. And as you go into the market and start asking questions, you will learn that, oh, I didn't ask 3 questions I should be asking, or 5 other questions that I didn't think of. And so you'll kind of adjust as you go and iterate as you go. I have used a number of different tactics around this. There may be some people in the room, I'm not sure who all's here today, but about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, before I had even left the prior company I was employed by, I did an email survey using SurveyMonkey of probably 2 or 3 dozen insurance agents and financial advisors around Des Moines. And that little 10-question survey helped inform some of my thinking around the ideation of Denim in those very, very early days, nascent days. So you could do it through email surveys, you could do it through telephone calls. I've done that, just phone conversations. Email somebody, do it over a cup of coffee. Of course, we all kind of joke that live here now, right? That, hey, Des Moines is wonderful for, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee and chat, right? That's kind of what we're known for. And so you just sit down and you say, hey, I'm curious about some things. You have to be naturally curious. And just, if you ask people for their help and their insight and for them to share, I found that typically most of those people will.
I would echo that and just add, surveys are great, but in my experience, nothing beats the actual conversations, whether they're face-to-face or on the phone. People are always willing to share input, or at least a certain percent of the population is, and go talk to them. And it can be very time-consuming to have lots of conversations, but it also is a very worthwhile investment. And then you start to look for patterns across them and understand the common themes that you're hearing.
I would also say that what people say and what people do are oftentimes different. So yes, we can solicit feedback and be intentional about that feedback, but on the Agrimedia team, we also look a lot at on-site behaviors and what they're actually doing and how they're responding. And I think social media can be a good example of that too. How do they react to different things, and trying to turn that into feedback as well.
Yeah, as we've like designed and laid out our own website, and then you look at heat maps of where people actually click, and it is endlessly fascinating to see what people say they would do versus then you look at their behavior on a heat map, which tells you what buttons they're clicking or spending time, and then what they actually do. I mean, it is just little stuff like that blows your mind with how illogical sometimes it is, but how kind of predictable people are, but then they will tell you that they're not predictable, and that if it was set up this way, they would do it that way. And then you set it up that way, and then they find a way to kind of do it the old way anyway. And so it is tricky to know what people say versus how they behave, but anytime you're hearing from several different people kind of unrelated on the same theme, that's when you kind of want to. And just having a casual conversation and one person brings up an issue kind of is an opening for you to then, the next time you're talking to somebody, say, oh, so-and-so told me this was an issue. And they might say, oh, I've never heard that before. They might say, actually, yeah, that is an issue. Like a good idea isn't like an idea that you had and somebody was thinking the opposite and they're like, oh, since you said it that way, I'm going to change my opinion. A good idea is something that's in the back of everybody's minds, and when you say it, you want them to be like, yeah, you know what? I was thinking the exact same thing. It's hard to kind of get that out of people all the time consistently.
Right. Okay.
It's 11:47. Am I in charge of time?
I think we're pretty close to lunch here. Thank you so much, Courtney, Gregory, Matt, and Mike for joining us today. This has been incredibly insightful, and thank you for the great questions from the audience. Do we have any closing statements before we break for lunch? Any last thoughts?
I think Brian had some really good closing statements, and I like that, which is, just to paraphrase a few of those, and it kind of goes back to the question we just answered about how do you go out and ask, and you have to put yourself out there, right? You just have to go for it and do it, and you will learn as you do. That's kind of the notion of no fear, go for it, adjust as you. It's kind of like flying an airplane as you're, working on the airplane and fixing it or building it as you're flying it. And the last thing I would say is just measure. We're in this data-heavy world now, right? And marketers, and make no mistake about it, if you're building a business, you're a marketer, or if you don't think you are, you will quickly find out that you are. and use, all of the tools that you have the capability to use nowadays and measure things and adjust. You will learn from that data and use it to your advantage.
Good points. Still nothing I can disagree on. I would add one comment that I don't know if we've said explicitly, but is implied through a lot of this conversation. So a lot of building a company, and particularly marketing, is learning, right? It's the testing, but it's learning from it. I describe myself as a serial entrepreneur, although I learned from Brian's talk this morning that I need to scrub that from my resume because it's got a bad connotation. That was good, but why am I crazy enough to do multiple businesses? Why are other people up here crazy enough to do that and others in the room? For me, it's because I love learning, right? Just the act of building businesses is the constant learning. And just when you think you know it all, something humbles you, something comes along to prove that you don't. But particularly when it comes to marketing and building out your marketing strategies and tactics and tools and all that, it's constant nonstop learning, and even once you think you've got it figured out, something changes as well. So I know the whole audience, you guys are in the room today because you love learning, or you want to learn, and particularly when it comes to marketing, there's so much more to learn about it.
Don't forget to have fun. And I know that we've talked a lot about data and measurement up here, but don't lose sight of your gut instinct either.
Yeah, I guess it's always the trust but verify. In any, entrepreneur, there's got to be like the two sides of the anything is possible if you put your mind to it. Plus, we're screwed. Like I'm at the start of the death spiral. Where would I work? Dust off my resume. Oh my God, it's extremely short. You only had one employer? Yes, RAYGUN. How'd that work out? Let's not talk about it. So you do have to have the two sides of there has to be this really strong belief of you want to work on a plan, come up with a plan, and your outward sales side to other people, to employees, has to be like, we can do this if we just march through the steps. But on the back end, you have to not drink your own Kool-Aid. You have to go through the numbers and see if it's actually working out the way you think it's working out, and take a hard look at why it's not working out. And you could have all the data in the world, and there could be different numbers that seemingly are telling you the exact opposite thing at the same time. I mean, there are just so many metrics at play that it's, even once you have all the numbers, it's hard to get a clear answer. So all you can do is, grab the information that you can, synthesize that information, and then just try to make the best decision possible based off of that information. But nobody is walking around with an answer to everything and just not letting you in on it. Everyone is kind of in the same boat that trust and verify is the way to go, and it's always going to be that way no matter how many years you've been in this.
I think the final thing I want to say, though, is quite opposite of data and measurement and all of that, and it's community. And so just think of your marketing efforts as building community and the strength of the connective tissue that you have with your community will have a direct impact on the results of your business over a period of time. To that extent, I invite all of you, if you want to connect on LinkedIn or however you want to connect. I don't know about you guys, I won't speak for you guys, but I'm certainly open to that, and just be aware I'll probably learn just as much, if not more, from each of you than I could ever share with you. So thanks for the opportunity.
All right, one more round of applause. Thank you, guys.